Welcome, everyone, to the Mentium Matters podcast, where we talk about leadership, life, and the transformative power of mentoring. I am Megan Cummings Kruger, and today I will be talking with a dynamic duo, a Mentium mentor and mentee who recently completed their executive mentoring program. After I learned about the uniquely strong partnership that they were able to develop and the profound impact that it had on both of them, I reached out and asked if they would share their experience on our podcast, tell us why they felt they were able to realize such success within 1 year. And happily, despite very busy schedules, they said yes. Before I begin our conversation, I want to provide some background on both of these partners with you. First, I'd like to share some background on the mentor in this partnership, Thomas Schlick. Tom is a business operations executive known for his unique ability to lead organizations through transformational change and growth. And he developed this strength over the course of his career, holding a number of senior executive roles, including COO, SVP, EVP, with P&L responsibilities at small, medium, and large corporations, both public and privately held. Companies that included Johnson & Johnson, Sterile Med, Emerson Electric, and others. Tom started his own consulting firm in 2017, as well as joining CO2 Partners in Minneapolis as a leadership coach. He is a committed leadership coach and mentor who has been partnering with Mentium since 2003. He's an active volunteer in his community, as well as serving on several professional advisory boards. He is also an adjunct professor at Hamline University School of Business in St. Paul, Minnesota. Tom received his BS in electrical engineering from University of Minnesota and his MBA in finance management from University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management. And last but certainly not least, he is the author of Jumpstart Your Service Revolution, Transform Your Company's DNA and Thrive in an Age of Disruption, which has earned impressive recognition and reviews since its publication. Tom lives in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and in between all that time he dedicates to everything I just shared, he enjoys spending time with his wife and family. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Megan.
Next, I'd like to share some background on Tom's mentee, Mike Terry. Mike is Director of Operations for Discover Financial Services. He began his career at Discover beginning as a frontline phone agent and then gained rich experience over the years in a variety of areas that included sales, customer service, collections, acquisitions, and fraud prevention. And this background provided him with a broad view of operations and strategy and allowed him to successfully develop a lean-based operation management system. Mike holds a bachelor's degree in business management, marketing, and related support services from Westminster College and an MBA in business administration and general management from the University of Utah. Mike resides outside of Salt Lake City with his wife and, like Tom, is a proud father of 4 children. However, they are a bit younger than Tom's adult children. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Megan.
I'd like to direct my first question to Mike. And that is, now that the structured program experience has ended for you and you've had some time to reflect, would you share what impact the executive mentoring program had on you?
Oh, it's had a great impact on me. As I think back on the time Tom and I spent together, the first thing that I learned certainly was career management skills. It's not something that I think I set out to learn from Tom, but as we started to have our conversations and as my career opportunities started to evolve and the landscape here at my company changed, I realized that it was a necessity. And it also happens to be a fact that Tom is an expert at this. I mean, he teaches classes on things like LinkedIn. He helped me take a profile that was pretty lackluster and make it awesome, created a better resume, brand statement. We talked about networking strategy, all of that stuff. And that's not, the flashy stuff that you learn maybe from a mentor, but it certainly has had a big impact on my ability to progress within the company and my confidence about my career. Another way that my experience with Tom has impacted me is just leadership effectiveness in general. The advice that I received from Tom as he and I discussed emergent, business challenges and career challenges and life challenges, to be honest, is stuff that I go back to and apply even now to new situations as they arise. And maybe the last thing that I'd say has really had an impact on me for my time with Tom is having had him as a mentor has helped me become a better mentor myself, right? Being able to see a master, and he really is a master at this, has helped me to try and replicate that experience for others that I mentor. This is a passion of mine, right? Helping others achieve their full potential, and trying to bring out the best in them, and pay forward all the great mentoring that I've received over the years is something that I'm super passionate about. And having the opportunity really to kind of see Tom at work has made me a better mentor. In fact, the last couple of sessions with Tom, when I knew our time was coming to a close, I said, Tom, I want to kind of shift gears here. Like, teach me to do what you're doing, because this has been an amazing experience, and I want to try and replicate this magic, for others going forward. And our last two sessions were wholly dedicated to just talking about the process that we had gone through and how he thought about mentoring, and how I could, kind of take some of those principles and apply them, for myself.
Absolutely. Well, and I will say that is quite a mentoring mentality, Mike. And let me turn the coin over and ask you, Tom, what impact did you see that this had on Mike, much less yourself?
Yeah. Well, first of all, as I was thinking about answering this question, and it was interesting because I was thinking about talking a little bit about career management, and Mike had just raised that himself. So again, I don't know if it's the universe or the fact that we have this close bond, but we seem to be on the same wavelength when about things we want to cover. So but probably to start for me, it was when I first got involved with Mike, I actually got his Mentium career canvas or goal setting canvas that he put out. And I've been with this for a long time, but his was really thorough and well thought out. You could tell he didn't just scribble down some quick answers. It was well thought out. And what struck me is, and maybe because I have these same characteristics, but he talks about how persistent and achievement oriented he is. And I like that because it resonates with me. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really proud of Mike for. He sticks to things. He's very achievement driven. And so that was kind of fun to know. But the thing that really caught my eye was that even though I'll call him a persistent achiever, he was very open and honest about the fact that he didn't think he had done quite the same job he'd like to have done on his career. And that in particular, he feels a little bit stagnant sometimes if the career growth isn't there. So it wasn't just talking about the career, but also how to feel good about where you are, because sometimes career growth isn't just upward, it's sideways, meaning you do the same job, but you just add responsibilities. And when you look at it through that lens, are you really stagnating in your job or not? So, but maybe the last piece that around the career management that I think I would say we started out our conversation with, and it was in his Mentium career canvas, was that Mike is understated. He doesn't like to put himself out. He's not out there as an arrogant me, I. He's very, very team driven and humble. And so it said in his canvas that he wanted the results to speak for themselves. And I like that totally. However, and I think you can also, talk about your successes and promote yourself a bit, because sometimes people don't listen or they don't see. So expecting them just to speak for themselves doesn't always work entirely well. But for Mike, it was not just saying, "Here's what I've done," but to look at what he has accomplished through his team. It's both professional, it's things that are done, but it's also very inclusive about his team. Because I firmly believe, and I know Mike believes this too, and I would say this to myself and to anybody I mentor: success is not a solo act. It's always a team type of effort in some manner when you get to be a leader like Mike is. And I think looking at it through that lens, he gained more confidence about how he could show up with himself and his successes without feeling like he was not as humble as he'd like to be. And then I'll just say last, he did say in the Otsent again in the mentor canvas that someday he'd like to be a mentor. So I knew at some point we'd get to the discussion of mentorship. I just didn't realize it would be near the end, but it was very timely when it did happen.
Yeah, and so much of what you were saying, Tom, also speaks to holding that mirror up and providing perspective, right? Or reframing. It sounds like, and Mike, I wonder if that part of that was your experience. Obviously, we all know Tom is a master mentor, but also it sounds like he did a great job of helping hold up the mirror for you to see a little bit clearer what the return image was. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And one of the things that I love about Tom, I mean, even now he's very complimentary, for someone like me who's very focused on self-development, and part of who I am is trying to become the best version of myself that I can be. That's a value that, I believe strongly in. Oftentimes we're overly critical of ourselves, and sometimes we focus too much on maybe where we're falling short, or what we haven't achieved, or what we haven't developed within ourselves. And it's great for a mentor to help you just pause for a minute and celebrate some of the things you have done well, and some of the strengths that you do have, and how you can focus on further developing those, and not just focusing on maybe where you're not where you want to be. And that's something that, absolutely stood out to me the entire time that I worked with Tom. Is, he'd key in on some of the successes that maybe I wasn't as focused on, or the achievements, or the strengths, and he'd really highlight those for me. It builds your confidence 100%, and absolutely, helps you put into perspective truly maybe where you're at.
Yeah, yeah. What a difference. Yeah, that can make. Absolutely. So I want to get a little more specific here. And for this next question, I'm just going to explain for listeners that aren't already aware, the Mentium Executive Mentoring Program is one of Mentium's cross-company programs. And what that means is mentees are matched with mentors who are outside of their organization. So it's a unique perspective. So I'm curious to hear how that aspect of the program may have benefited or not your experience. And again, I'd like to start with you, Mike.
Yeah, I thought it was critical for achieving what Tom and I achieved together over, the year plus that we were paired up. I've had many mentors over the course of my career. I've, formal and informal, leaders that have kind of taken me under their wing or helped me out, or, bosses that were working on my development. And uh, I would not be where I am today without the investment of so many people, so many people. But for me, I have worked at Discover Financial Services for 22 years. It was my first real job as an adult. And so everything I know is related to that corporate culture. Everything I've seen done has been done essentially the same way. And it can become something of an echo chamber where the people that are around you, are all kind of coaching each other the same way. And so for Tom to be my mentor was a great blessing, because he's worked with other companies, he's worked in other industries, right? Multiple other companies, and he had just a wealth of different ways of looking at the problems that I was facing, and giving me insight and perspectives that I don't think I would have or could have gotten from the mentors that I could find around myself, within the company. So I thought that was really critical. The other piece too about having somebody outside of the company is it truly does become a safe space. And I remember when I was first getting into the program, it was made very clear that this is, you know, 100% confidential, that, while my boss is the one who set up this program for me, there weren't going to be reports back to her about, what we were talking about or what we were working on. And that made it just a really safe place. When I got on the phone with Tom, for our meetings, I knew there was no other agenda other than helping me. He's volunteering to do this. My success or my failure wouldn't impact him, financially, professionally, or anything. He was doing it out of the kindness of his heart. And I also knew that it wasn't going to be discussed with other people, that I could talk about really difficult things, maybe even very sensitive, challenges that I was going through. And I knew it wouldn't show up in a performance evaluation or feedback when I went to post for something. It was truly a safe sounding board. I remember one time I had a challenge with a leader in my company, and I was pretty emotional about it. To be frank, I, I needed advice, and there was nobody in my company that I felt like I could get the type of advice that I needed in a safe way. And I just could not wait to talk to Tom. and to walk through like how I was feeling, how, what the problem was, and then just sit back and ask for advice. Like, how can I get through this? And it was such a blessing for me. I mean, it was just to be able to sit back and have him hear me and have him talk through not just, what had happened, but how I was feeling about it, and put together a plan for how I could overcome it. By the end of the conversation, I felt like 90% better. And I had a plan going forward to go and talk to this leader within the company and address my concerns. And that gave me confidence to have the conversation and do it right. And I went and had the conversation. It went incredibly well. And I was able to, resolve this concern and move forward. And I don't know that I could have done that with somebody, up here in the company or another leader in the company without, and have it be as safe of a conversation. I don't know how much you remember about that, Tom, but.
Yeah, I do. And I appreciate your comments, Mike, a lot, because, having been a leader in many organizations, like you said, and leading large teams and go from around the world, and then have, say, 20 years plus here with Mentium with different executives, I do feel I have an opportunity to give back and to help. But what's really important, I say this, I've said this to Megan before and others at Mentium, really, I feel like I learn as much, if not more, than I give back. So as you show appreciation for maybe what I've done for you, when I listen to you and learn from you, your experiences and how heartfelt this is for you as an issue, and then your willingness to take on and try some ideas that I think might work, but obviously you have to agree with them. For you to do that and then come back and feel like it was a success for you personally is really rewarding for me. And that the joy I get out of it is knowing that you're in a better place. Not so much that I gave you support, but that you ended up in a better place. That's really important to me.
Well, and what strikes me also is how holistic the support is, because, as Mike was sharing that, it sounds like, Tom, you were able to provide, both professional perspective and drawing from your vast cross-functional, cross-industry type perspective, but also the personal perspective. Mike has shared that you also helped him navigate the emotional side of things, which is a part of the profession.
Yeah, it is. And I think this is where I really applaud Mike, because he was really open and transparent and very authentic throughout. And when you start talking about things like building your self-confidence or building your self-awareness and getting into what you might consider might be things in your career you may not be as proud of or don't feel as good about your progress, some of those things can become deeply personal. And so to have a safe space for both of us to have that conversation, for Mike to find a path forward, but do so in a way that's safe, is really beneficial for me too, to be able to have that. If I wouldn't have that if he hadn't been open and transparent and authentic in the first place. So it's it's just so important.
And Tom, I'm curious, you've had at this point, I think right now you were mentoring your 19th Mentium cross company mentee. And that's, of course, above and beyond all the mentoring that you do wherever you are within your own organizations. I'd love to just have you share, what is it, as busy as you are, that draws you to adding a Mentium cross company partnership to all of your mentoring efforts?
Well, I believe early on in my career, I benefited from a mentor. I had a boss who was my mentor in a sense, and he was very, very open with me and honest, and really helped me get on the right track when I was off track. And as I've shared with Mentium before, when I first became a young manager, I wasn't very good. I was terrible, in fact. And so I had to learn from others and from my mentor how to be a better leader. And I always sort of, you can look back in inflection points in your life and you can say, this is where I turned a corner. This is where I took a different path. This is where I think made a difference for me. And I think that was that inflection point for me where I could turn right instead of left and say, okay, what I need to do is quit worrying about me and my career and my advances and my successes, and recognize that that will come. That's a result. That is not the goal. That's the result of some other behaviors, some other actions. And to me, those actions were building a team, building a high-performing team, growing good leaders, hiring people that are excellent, onboarding them well, helping them move on if they aren't a good fit, right? But giving everybody an opportunity to have a candid conversation. So it became sort of second nature for me to want to help people succeed. But succeed doesn't always mean you stay with your same company. Sometimes success means you have to move on. And if you recall, I had a person who I mentored with Mentium a few years ago, who we took a turn inside his role where he ended up leaving the organization. And we continued our mentorship as he joined a new company, and he absolutely thrived in that new organization. So I'm not here advocating people leave their jobs if they're unhappy, but I'm saying I recognize when there's that time that we have to have that discussion that things aren't working. And then we have other decisions to make that lead to other discussions that lead to other things. And done right will be successful. In Mike's case, if I could just add on to what he was saying, the career thing was important for me, and I know it was important for Mike. And I think that's why, like, we started our conversation on career. This is probably a good point just to continue that conversation just a bit longer, because I feel like when you're a personal high achiever like Mike, and you're persistent, your career matters to you. You know what I mean, we identify who we are, often maybe wrongly so, with what we do. It's our job. And so you want to have success at that. And if you don't always feel successful, it sometimes shows in your body language, and your shoulders are down, and you don't always smile, and maybe you don't have quite the spring in your step you'd like. So for me, working with Mike on the career thing was very important. And I think he mentioned it to work on his LinkedIn profile, but in particular to look at his personal brand. Because I think when a person develops a personal brand and they're proud of it, and it takes time to do, by the way. I mean, you got to figure out you got to figure out who you are, what you do, and why. And in my world, you do that in 6 to 8 words, and when you start putting those words together, it's very hard. It's it's agonizing, but when you get it, it clicks. And so I'd say 12 years ago, I wish I could say it was longer, but I didn't learn this until maybe 12 years ago. I created my own personal brand with some help. I didn't do it all by myself, but was transforming organizations to drive profitable growth. Those words just clicked with me. And the reason they're important is because they are me. They are part of my soul, part of who I am. And so when some people say, well, Tom, what do you do? Or what do you do? Or how are you? What's your job? Or how, whatever. My first out of the box statement is, well, my personal brand is X. That's what I stand for. And by the way, that's so much more effective than trying to listen through a 45-second elevator speech. Get that brand out there, and then you can fill in with things that you've done to support that brand. And when we did that with Mike, and we get that on his LinkedIn profile, and he built his personal brand that he's got, I saw in Mike an elevation of his confidence, an elevation of his self-awareness of who he was as a professional. And so it validated for me again that having that personal brand is important. It's important for a person's career. It's important for how people look at you. It's important for what you want to do in the future. Because saying who you are, what you do, and why you do it in 6 to 8 words is not easy, but it's important. And Mike did it.
Well, and it also occurs to me as you're talking, Tom, that part of mentoring is also that gift of time, right? To be able to pause and think about this. I imagine, Mike, it had probably been quite a long time before you'd spent that amount of time on yourself. Would that be fair?
Yeah, for sure. And to have it structured and have somebody coach you through not just, how much time to spend, but where to spend it to get the most value out of it. The key elements, I think was really beneficial for sure.
I think it helped you, Mike. My sense is that as you look at your growth now and what you're doing, even with the merger of what your Capital One and Discover, the fact that what you're doing, you're able to accelerate and move through those changes with more ease, because I think of your strength in terms of how you see yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And just the confidence that comes from doing exactly what Tom just said, right? Like when that merger happens and I'm sitting down with new bosses at a new company, determining whether I'm still going to be employed or, to be able to say exactly what value I bring in a clear and concise way, to be able to describe to potentially a new team that I may be managing exactly how I operate. It's not just about a job interview. It's truly about how you operate and execute. And it was a great exercise.
Yeah, and it really also gets to a win-win, right? Because then the organization has a much better understanding of what they have in you. You have that understanding, but they do too, in order to, navigate through with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the beauty is, because Mike wants to mentor, he'll be able to give that back to others that he mentors. And that torch gets passed again and again and again. And others have a chance to grow from Mike's wisdom and from Mike's success. And that's really, really rewarding for me to know that Mike will help someone else be successful.
Absolutely. Tom, one other question around mentoring, and that is, again, because we've had just such a luxury of having so many partnerships with you, you've gone back and forth partnering with Mentium in both our regular mentoring program as well as our executive program, which you and Mike were in. How are those experiences different for you?
Well, it's a great question. I would say there's a lot of similarities in that you have to, I think what everybody does, I want to say that differently. The way people view the relationship has to be one where first you build a lot of trust because you want to have that trust. Without trust, you have nothing, right? So you want to have trust. And then once you have that trust, you can create that judgment-free zone where you can talk about anything. And that's when the curtain comes down and people are really open and transparent. And I can see I've had that opportunity to do that, whether it's been in the executive program or the other program. But I would also say that I think in the executive program, the people who, like Mike, for example, they're just a tad more serious about what they want to accomplish in their career. And I think there's a certain element of not just personal achievement and drive, that willingness at that point to give back as well. So because in all Mike's discussions, again, I'll go back to mentor canvas, Mentium canvas goal. He talked about wanting to know more about mentorship and be a mentor before we even started, right? Even though we talk about it towards the end of our session together, he was talking like that early. I don't hear that often in the other program. I hear a lot about how I can advance and what I need to do to get better. Same kind of scenario, same kind of skill sets you want to develop, same kind of issues, same kind of dialogue. But that willingness to want to step in and be a mentor and help others is, I think, unique. I think it's unique to Mike in a bit because he's wired that way, but I also think it's something in the executive program that exists that doesn't in the other.
I'd like to also focus for a minute on what you both have been sharing a bit, but I want to really highlight it right now. The two of you were able to create an especially strong partnership. I mean, really the kind of caliber that we all hope for when we begin a mentoring experience.
I like to think that Mike is my brother with a different mother.
Well, that is an excellent success right in and of itself. But I'd love to hear just a little bit more. We've been hearing some of this already, but what is it that the other did that you feel enabled you both to be able to create such a strong trust and bond, really, between you?
You want to go
Go ahead.
first, Tom, or do you want me?
Oh, you're far better. You're more eloquent. Go ahead.
It's a good question. And I've never told Tom this, but when we first started our partnership, this mentoring relationship, I was really nervous. Your boss comes to you and says, "Hey, would you like to participate?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love, this opportunity." And you get a couple of, resumes and bios to kind of look at, and you choose who you think you're gonna align best with, I guess. And so I chose Tom just looking at him on paper, but I didn't know him. And looking at his resume, obviously a very successful person, you know what I mean? And maybe a little intimidating, right? And so I was really nervous to go into this relationship, not knowing what to expect, how the conversations were going to go, if it was just going to be awkward. And it was none of that. Like within like 3 minutes, and this is maybe part of like the magic of just Tom himself, completely set me at ease. with his just friendly and unassuming manner. Tom's the kind of guy like you want to get seated next to at the business dinner, because you're going to have a great conversation. You're going to feel totally comfortable, have plenty to talk about, and enjoy the time. And that's really where we started off. He set me at ease right off the bat. He seemed genuinely interested in me, which is, we went back and talked about mentoring, and he was telling me about some of the things. He wanted to learn about me. He was genuinely interested in me and my success. And I think that was the absolute key. And I have shared that tip with many others since we have had that conversation, is just go in as much with the intent to learn as with the intent to teach. And you just come off differently. It makes it way more comfortable, and you build a stronger connection right off the bat. I already kind of mentioned, but he helped me see past my own faults to my strengths and built me up. And obviously that is great for a relationship as well. And as my career situation changed, as my life situation changed, our relationship and conversations changed. One thing that happened to me while in my family, while our mentoring relationship was happening, is my wife was diagnosed with uterine cancer. And that's not a super comfortable thing to talk to people about, but I 100% felt good talking to Tom about it. And it all kind of came about at a time in my career when there was an opportunity to post for a promotion. And it was a difficult decision for me. These opportunities don't come available very often. As Tom mentioned, sometimes I think we tie our self-worth up a little bit too much to our careers and the progression. And I had this decision to make, and my wife was 100% supportive either way of whatever I did. But do I pass on this opportunity or not? And would I regret that down the line? And I was just torn about what to do. And this was another time when Tom gave me this great gift of just talking to him, and just I knew the right choice, right? It was not to post. It was to spend all my time and focus and energy on my family, to not introduce more stress into my life and my wife's life at this time. I just needed somebody else to tell me that, somebody else to give me permission to make that right decision. And at that point, Tom and I had this great relationship. We talked about a lot of personal things up until that point, and so I was able to bring the decision to him and let him be a sounding board and give me that gift of just saying, like, you know what, you're thinking about it right. Like, what you need to do. Just all you got to do is do it. It's such a blessing to me. Such a great relief to hear somebody else say out loud what my heart was already telling me, and it was awesome.
What a gift to have that in your life, the timing of that. I'm so grateful that you had that during that time.
Yeah.
And that's such a compliment also to you, Tom. Obviously, it speaks to the bond and the trust that you two had established by then.
Yeah. And I remember when I brought it up, because I was running a little bit late for a meeting that he and I were having, and we had an agenda set and planned, and it was not this. It was not to talk about any of this. And I just said, sorry, I'm a little late coming back from an appointment with my wife. And then I just kind of laid it all out. And to Tom's credit, you know what I mean? Like, the entire agenda shifted, right? Like, he's like, we're not talking about any of that. We're talking about your family. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about this thing that's happening to you right now. And it was awesome just to shift and to be a person with Tom for a minute and not talk about business when I was prepared to go through with the agenda and talk about those things. Tom knew what I needed in that moment was not that. It was awesome.
Phenomenal. How about for you, Tom?
I can kind of get a little bit choked up. Just makes his sincerity and his honesty and his kindness are beyond what I can expect for myself. So thank you, Mike. But I would say for me, it was immediate. I would say the first time we got on the phone, I could sense a real strong bond. And you don't do that with everybody. You give everybody the benefit of the doubt. You want to be their friend. You want to help. You hope you get along. Hope there's some common threads of interest. But it was much deeper than that with Mike. Right away, I sensed in him again that authenticity. And honestly, maybe to summarize some of what we've been talking about here, whether it's career or personal, that willingness to have the difficult conversations about career, difficult conversations about transition, difficult conversations about bosses, difficult conversations about his personal life. Some people don't like to have those critical, difficult conversations. Mike is willing to have that conversation. And I appreciate that because that's where I think the true learnings and the true emotions that surround those learnings happen. It's at that intersection when you can be in that difficult conversation, but trust that there's no judgment, trust that there's no other agenda other than just that, and then to talk your way through that at that point to some resolution, not a permanent resolution, but a resolution at that moment is really a powerful experience. And Mike enabled that to happen because he showed up willing to have those difficult conversations. Now, on a lighter note, I would say there's probably one thing I'd add that I believe I think it was important for me to share with Mike because I think it helped him, it helped me help him maybe, was that a lot of times when we're talking about ourselves with others, or we're trying to explain something or ask, whatever is going on, I noticed in Mike more of a tendency to make a statement about something, and then the dialogues would be more about the statements being made. And the one I ask him just to twist a little bit is to think about things more through the lens of a question, because when you ask people questions, they're very disarming. Questions are disarming. There's not even a slight hope that there or that fear that there might be an unintended consequence. Sometimes when you make a statement, someone says, "What's the agenda?" or "What else is that behind that? What's behind that statement?" or "What's going on? Why did the person say that?" But when you ask a question, it's disarming. You're there to try and learn. You're there to try and understand. In fact, I use this little saying with other Mentium podcasts, but and it's what I try to take to these relationships is to seek to understand before being understood. And questions allow you to do that. It helps you understand where the other person's coming from. Why is this happening? Or what led to this? Or what could have been done different? It's disarming. And I think Mike has learned that. And those questions that you ask really open up people's hearts and their minds to offer the kind of material and information that you can grow from without ever having to feel like, well, did that go okay? Or did that person say something that I didn't understand? That kind of goes away when you're asking questions. And I think Mike's learned that. And I think that's part of what comes out of a difficult conversation is that ability to learn that. And I think in my feelings, it's helped Mike be a better leader.
Absolutely. Yeah, we spent multiple sessions just talking about questions and their power and effectiveness. It was awesome.
Probably the real good example was that you remember you put that onboarding or that 90-day plan together.
Yeah.
And we talked about, what kind of questions you want to ask people. And instead of maybe, starting out by saying, what do you do and what's your goals? We started talking about who are you and what makes you tick and what's important to you and what's important to you and your family. You were starting to ask a different genre of questions, which I think built trust, and you put somebody else at ease. So then you could have those other conversations around how are we going to work together as part of my team.
Yeah. And the questions we put together have honestly become like a template for me. I've used it 2 different roles that I've moved into since. So it's been great.
Yeah. But they come out of having difficult conversations. I don't think you do that naturally.
Yeah.
That is such a great point. I could talk to the two of you for 4 more hours, but I'm going to leave you with one final question. And that is, and I'm curious to hear the answer. And Mike, I'll start with you again. Do you right now happen to have a favorite quote or motto that you use?
I do have a quote. I put it on my team board, and I think it speaks, I think, to maybe my thoughts on leadership and maybe where the most effective leadership and it comes from a guy named Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. It says, if you want to build a ship, Don't drum up people to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the vast and endless sea. And I just love that quote, because I think in my experience, when you have a group of talented people, right, in the right roles, and everybody's excited about going in the same direction, like magic happens. Problems get resolved, solutions appear, and there's nothing that you can't accomplish. And so, but it all starts with just that desire and that excitement about where you're going.
I love that. I love that quote. Thank you for sharing, Mike.
Well, one of my favorite ones, and I use it often. Actually, I use it in all my classes I teach at Hamlin, because I deal with 26 adults that are working full-time in different occupations, and they got me to go through classes with in an MBA program. And they struggle like everybody does with work and balancing things and trying to get along with their boss and learn, and they got me, and et cetera, et cetera. And so the thing I try to remind them that's important to me, and it came from this quote from Maya Angelou, and her quote was that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think it's home for me, because that's my whole, what I want to be able to do is make people feel good about themselves in an honest, constructive way, but also to make it memorable, to make sure that I give them enough hope that they're willing to pass that on and give back to others, like Mike's talking about doing and is doing with his mentorships and stuff. So that quote means a lot to me.
It captures you perfectly. Mike and Tom, I want to thank you so much for being so open and authentic in sharing your partnership story. I think it's such a great illustration of what is possible when a mentor and mentee share focus and dedication, both to learning, but also to each other. And I will add courage to be open to who you really are and asking for what you need. And it's also amazing to see how holistic mentoring can be as a result. So I thank you both for saying yes, for taking the time to pass it on. It is just so inspiring to hear stories like yours that really demonstrate the power of mentoring and reminds us that this is open to us all.
Thank you for giving us a
Megan.
chance to talk about it.
I also want to thank all of our listeners for joining us for this Mentium Matters podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. And if you're interested in additional resources, you can find our show notes on the Mentium website. We look forward to having you join us for our next inspiring episode.